I always start really enthusiastic. I'm always like, hey, welcome, yo!
Oh, don't become so deflated so quickly.
Immediately, that is just me. I'm 5 seconds of all enthusiasm, and then I'm like, yeah, this will be the best day ever. Is it raining? This is the worst. This is the worst. But this isn't the worst podcast. This is the best podcast. Welcome to Brickin It with in development with the Goodwin Trust. We are joined today by
Pete Connelly, archaeology manager with Humberfield Archaeology.
That's right, a man whose life's in ruins. And I'm your host, Jed Salisbury. And obviously, this is the third in the series. So if you've not caught up, go back, revisit the first two. You'll know who we both are then. You'll know what the podcast is about. Saves me repeating myself. Good to see you, man. How are you been? How's the dig going?
Yeah, the dig's going fantastic. Yeah, we're just coming to the end of it. We've been on it for 11 weeks. I've got no idea where the summer's gone. And, we've uncovered the remains and the story of this amazing South Blockhouse building, this thing that was in use for 350 years. I mean, 350 years, that's a long period of time.
That is... You know what? It's crazy because I think of the blockhouse and it's old and not old at the same time, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. Oh, it's quite... Do you know what? That's very insightful, isn't it? Because it's quite modern, and that reflects part of the time in which it was set. So, we've talked about Henry and all the shenanigans that he gets up to. But at that time in the 16th century, you're moving from a kind of really strange, weird medieval world, because the past is an odd place, into a more modern world. And so a lot of historians and archaeologists think of it as the start of the modern era, where you've got this early modern, early modern, there's your label, early modern era starting to come in from the 16th century. So we've had the Renaissance in Italy and wider Europe, and we see elements of the Renaissance here in Britain. And so you just get that upsurge in science and more scientific thinking and moving away from, worrying about the bogeyman underneath the bed every night. And so, this is like the first step into modernity.
Wow, so that's quite interesting that we're now stop worrying about the boogeyman in the bed, and now we have to start worrying about the boogeyman in Parliament. But let's not get into that quite just yet. So that's quite an interesting time point then, to see that this is the modern start of history, and probably more of our modern recorded history would have started around here. Yeah,
a lot of history up to this point has really kind of been driven by church and state and royalty. You do get things like, obviously, you get Chaucer, and you get the English novel appearing, but a lot of that is transcripts. The minute, amazing breakthrough, minute somebody starts getting the printing press into position, so something that's coming out of Germany, the minute you start getting rise of printing means that you can get your fanzines out there as quickly as possible, you can get people on your side, you can distribute all your propaganda a lot quicker. Royally hate it. The church and the state hate it because printing puts power in the hands of the people. You can basically set up your printing block. You can print hundreds and thousands of, say, single-page protests, and then you can distribute them. So imagine that as a threat to the people who have been running all that historical kind of narrative. Because if you command the pen, you command the power. But suddenly you put printing in the hands of people, and you get everybody trying to ban it. You get all of them saying, no, you can't print that. It's still got to be a handwritten manuscript and things like that. The minute you do that, then you're giving power to the folk.
Okay, let's break this down for the younger audience. So a printing press and a fanzine is essentially your own Facebook page, with your own statuses to put out there. I don't even know if kids still use Facebook, I'll be honest. I'm out of touch as it is.
Am I really, really showing my age because I've used the word fanzine?
Fanzine,
yeah.
I know what one is. It's your own personal little magazine.
It's your own personal magazine. You can print it cheap. You can, but I mean, the thing is now, you can obviously design it on your laptop, on your PC, on your smartphone, and then you can just send it to print and sell it for a few pennies. Give it to your mates. Cover off, your favourite comedian.
Much like we had vlogs. We have vlogs now. This was then.
Yeah, much like your vlog. I think this is more like here's my little review of the local scene in Hull. So imagine that at a level where like you've got people going, I don't agree with the king. I don't agree with what he's doing. I'm going to print my annoyance, my anger, and I can do it because I can afford it and it's cheap, and I can run out loads of copies and I can send them to my mates and hand them out in town before people like take me away.
I imagine there's quite a lot of punishment for that then, type of going against the king, because as much as people, I mean, we just had the Queen's funeral and people have been getting arrested for protesting, for shouting things. Yeah. Was it a similar sort of thing back then?
Yeah, a lot of that's sedition.
Right.
If you've got to watch what you say. But people are angry, and like you get people who are angry in every decade, in every century. There's, nothing's always 100% smooth, is it? So, if you can take that power and you can print it and people can read it. So here's the other thing that goes hand in hand. So obviously the rise of literacy. If you're going to print things, you need to, hopefully there'll be enough people who are able to read it, or people who will go around and read it out for you. Right. So you get people walking in town, and like if you gather a lot of folk together, they might not have the literacy skills to read the script themselves, but somebody can stand there and say, right, we're printing this because we don't like the way that Parliament is doing something, or we don't like the way that the royalty is doing something else, or we don't like the way that Hull City Council are driving roads through certain areas or whatever. It'd be that kind of equivalent.
That's kind of exciting. That is really giving power to the people.
Yeah, and that's where this modern era starts to come in. You've got the sciences, people looking at the differences of light traveling through different lenses, and people starting to understand the very basis of what, certainly in Western European, because actually in the Near East and the Middle East, scientific knowledge has actually already been going for a few centuries. So it seeps into Western Europe, and then you sort of start to get this climb into what becomes our modern world.
That's so exciting, and just to think that the blockhouse outside, to bring it back locally, is an example of that. Because I imagine the people of Hull, like you said, that the blockhouse appears, a wall appears, and now some people are living on the outside of the wall, some people living on the inside.
Yeah, and the fact that the whole design of the blockhouse and the castle and the North Blockhouse as well as a fortification, it's something new, it's something revolutionary. We're all used to seeing medieval castles. You might go to Helmsley Castle or Pickering Castle and you see all these ruinous castles. Much of it made ruined by Oliver Cromwell and his parliamentarians. They've done a good job at making those things look quite rustic. But the things here are modern because they're being designed by a group of engineers, a group of castle builders who are being influenced by the renaissance of castle building coming out of Italy, so Italian design. And Dürer in northern in Germany, he illustrates some of these new types of castles. And all this filters through into what becomes the device castles of Henry VIII. These new structures that are designed to withstand cannon attack, so the rise of cannons as another modern artillery warfare. It's really starting to become a big thing. So when you're designing your castle, it needs to have thick walls. It needs to be able to withstand cannon attack. You need to be able to fire cannons safely from it. And this curving shape, which you don't just get on the blockhouse here, you see it in different places along the south coast of England and around the area of Kent and the Medway, where these curving bastions are designed to deflect cannonballs. So if a cannonball comes in it ricochets off it.
I'm sorry, you said Kevin Bastion. I thought you swore on the podcast then. I was going to say, all right, calm down. I know you're passionate about it.
Curving Bastion. Yeah. It's not every day that somebody's going to use the phrase curving Bastion in a podcast.
No, that's wonderful. I'm trying to think of what the equivalent would be of modern day, but I guess it is literally waking up and finding an airfield with jets and everything else on your doorstep.
Yeah, suddenly, yeah. It would be like that. Like living here in Hull, and somebody says, right, in 2 years' time, there's going to be an RAF bomber base sitting on your doorstep and up and running, and everything that requires you just be like, what? Right here, right now, this is going to happen? And all the designs that need to come with it, because obviously you need to design the runways and things like that. There's a brilliant bit when you when you drive down to Lincoln and you go down the A15. It's a Roman road. It's long and straight, but at one point it kinks. The road gets pushed out. So if you're going south, it gets pushed out to the east, and you think, what's going on here? And what you come to realise is that the road gets pushed away because it goes past an RAF base, and the road gets pushed away because they had to extend the runway I think it was in the 1960s for Vulcan bombers, and so they needed a longer runway, which meant this nice big straight Roman road had to be detoured to accommodate it. That's the equivalent of what you would see now. It's sort of like your whole world in some ways being turned upside down to accommodate something militarily modern. Just think of those poor folks in Tripool, like in the parish here. They've been getting along their daily lives, they're thinking, it's the 15th century, everything's fine. They moved off into the 16th century and think, not much has changed in the 16th century, I'm loving this, we've got our own little parish, we've got St. Peter's Church, we can see Hull on the other side of the river, we can trade, but, we've got our own identity. And then somebody comes along in 1541 and says, kind of much like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right, well, we're just going to build a great big thing through here. We're just going to destroy part of this, and you're going to find yourselves on the other side of the wall. You'd be going, what? What do you mean? And then in the space of 2 years, you see these blockhouses and this castle built and this big curtain wall built, and then suddenly you find yourself on the wrong side of the wall. What's going on there?
You're like the wildlings from Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
And the difference between them is they're on the wrong side of the road. So what you were being compensated? Like, was this land owned by anyone, or did people get moved off? Is that something you know?
I think, I don't know if people get moved off, but it's something that happens. I don't know if it was happening here. Right. But interestingly, and I think this, now you can help me out here, Jed. I hear that there's a lot of difference between West Hull and East Hull.
Oh, absolutely! It's a rivalry in the making, yeah.
Yeah. So what's the fine thing like? How.
So this is where I have a slight problem. So there is East Hull and West Hull, and it's on each side of the river. I'm North Hull.
Right. Okay.
So we're never involved in this argument. It's always East and West Hull. No one ever brings North Hull. We're like the middle child, ignored and forgotten. So I just know East Hull and West Hull have a rivalry, but I don't know much about it.
So, like, when does East and West Hull become North Hull?
So I'm guessing North Hull will be like I want to say modern, but the council estates post-war that were knocked up really fast. So you have your Orchard Park and your Branzo.
Yeah.
Is where North Hull is.
Right.
So I think North Hull recently is newish addition.
Also, it's like the little forgotten lesser child. It's the youngest one. It's sort of like it's almost like East and West Hull have grown up, left home, and then North Hull's been born, and they go, well, it's not my brother or sister.
Yeah. And then the parents are too old to parent it, so they forgot about it. Like, we'll just leave it to its own.
Yeah, leave it to its own devices.
So we've got this little Mowgli of Hull, little raised by wolves North Hull that I absolutely adore. Yeah. And I mean this with love, but it is a very feral place. And then you've got East Hull, which would be so I don't even know. I guess it'd be Holderness Road further down. Yeah. And then we've got Annalby Road, which would be West Hull. Yeah. I might have that the wrong way around.
No.
There's someone probably screaming at me I've got this wrong. But I think I believe West Hull's a bit more established and a bit higher.
Well, that's where I'm going with this in a kind of way.
And then East Hull is probably, I guess, I don't want to say the slums, but it's I assume that's what it probably started out as.
Well, I think where I'm going with this is the fact that we've got West Hull, it's got the old town within it, on the west side of the river, and you've got that burgeoning development out of the old town. But from a kind of psychological point of view, the minute this big wall and these blockhouses and castle put up, it's kind of making anything to the east of it a bit east, like
Yeah.
outside. So the people at Drypool suddenly find themselves on the wrong side of the wall. So I'm just speculating. I'm wondering that, could the roots of East and West Hill have been sown, dare I say it, by the building of the Henry VIII fortifications?
I think if we're looking back at the rivalry, definitely that's the start. Did they start playing rugby about that time as well?
Let's claim it. Let's
claim it.
Let's just claim it.
That is it. So if you do come to the open day on Saturday, you can see the start of the whole KR and whole FC rivalry by just one blockhouse that Henry VIII built.
Yeah. The East Hull West Hull rivalry, a rivalry written in brick nearly 500 years ago.
That's amazing. See, that's what history is. It's sometimes just a plot made up by two men in a porter cabin on a dig site.
Yeah. Hopefully somebody will be listening to this in 100 years' time going, wise words.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
And you know what? Prove us wrong. That's the wonderful about history. Yeah. It's true until it's proven wrong, and no one can do that.
I guess like somebody else will probably in so many years' time going, they're talking about Facebook and vlogs. What are these things?
What are these?
My fanzine ideas are like what's social media now. They'll be
cave paintings. Yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's just been beamed straight into your head. What a scary thought.
Well, scary thought that's shared amongst many now. I guess that's the one. And I mean, people would have been like that though, because obviously we are at the luxury of, even if you go back 30 years, science have changed the landscape and the way we think massively. So if you're at the big bang, the cause of this change, and obviously we've got the key. We have the passport to Europe in here. Yeah. So the change of people, their lives, and I don't want to kick that, but I imagine before it was quite church run, secretarial, the king was the king, everything. But now you've got these people coming in, you've got opinions, there is a revolution of change. Yeah. That's such a fascinating time to be around.
Yeah, and that's a really good way of phrasing it as well, a revolution of change. And that, coming back to the printing press, so being able to do that and being able to do it quickly and cheaply and clandestinely, because printing can be done without the control of the royalty or the powers that be or the church or the state. It can be done by, Mr. Jones in his back room of his merchant's house. It's something that can be done, like I say, clandestinely. And then these things can be handed out anonymously. And they could be questioning political beliefs, they could be questioning the Bible, they could be questioning maybe parts of the Bible.
And this would have been the first time this is kind of done publicly, because we come from a history of, you mentioned it before, people believing in dragons, people believing in the devil. The word of church was law, the word of king would have been law. Yeah. And now you've got people in open written rebellion against this.
Yeah. The past is a weird place, and nobody should forget that even a century ago to our 21st century beliefs and our outlooks and what we know, it's the century ago is a weird place. So take that even further, take it to the back end of the medieval period, where it's not just like, oh, there's a dragon, and dragons are lovely pictures, or dragons are some of the things that we see in Game of Thrones, amazing sort of things. But the firm belief in a dragon is something that people believe, that these things exist, that King George has slayed a dragon. They are real things in people's minds. The devil is a real thing in people's minds. Obviously, God and the whole belief system around God, but the whole pantheon of angels and everything else, and cherubs, people believe that cherubs, these chubby little cute things, that it might make people fall in love.
And it doesn't mean me; he means real cherubs.
You just don't have the wings. I think that's the problem.
That's what you think. Hidden under this t-shirt, you won't see me play a harp.
Now, there's something I would pay for. So all this belief system, things like green men, which seem quite pagan, and they are, and that's their origin. But this whole annual cycle of what is growing and what has to be harvested, and the green man and his harvest, and this can be all brought in. People believe in this thing and all these things, and people believe that the devils and little nasty little things can live in the dark corners of houses, or you have to put things in the doorways to ward off witches. You get witch bottles and things like that with, say, iron nails, putting them in. They put into the doorways to stop people coming in. People believe that is a weird place. There's a great bit of archaeology in the Hull and East Riding Museum. The George Yard entrance posts. You can go and see them in the medieval gallery. And these are carved posts that date back to the 15th century. They're beautiful things. They were recovered and kept and conserved earlier in the 20th century, as far as I remember. But you see carved into these posts like different emblems. So there's an English rose, but one of them has a dragon carved into it. And that's not just a dragon that's carved there because people think it's a great thing to look at, or somebody might think, oh, I'm going to have that as a tattoo. Yeah. No, somebody's carving that because they believe in dragons. They believe that this symbolism might guard the entranceway into this yard. It's a beautifully decorative thing. We look at it through decorative eyes. But the person who would have carved that, say 600 years ago, roughly, would have seriously believed that dragons are real. That an attack by a dragon is something that could happen. That there is massive differences in what's going out in the countryside, and what sort of elves and things. We call them elves, but spirits and.
The thing is, a bit of me wants to go, oh, what a bunch of idiots, as if they believed that. But I mean, some people don't believe in COVID, so I don't think modern times I don't think people got more reasonable. Science has just got harder to disprove.
Yeah. Like if you think about it, if you're growing up in a world that you don't know that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, you've not got all the evidence to take you this way, and all the growing body of evidence that comes with more and more analysis. If you're in a world where you believe that the world is created in 7 days and how it's created, that really influences your life. And that was obviously going to influence your whole outlook on life. And, to be fair on anybody then, is the fact that, if we were all alive then, and that was our world sphere, that's what we believe. It just comes with time. Then we look back at it and think, wow, that's a weird place to inhabit. That's a weird place. And all the other things that come, there's, if you take the floods, and you take Noah and the floods, and you firmly believe that Noah and the floods and all of that happens and exists, but you live in Hull where it floods all the time, you're going to basically see some of that biblical life coming into your real life. We know that Hull has massive floods during the medieval period and into the following centuries. And that's why we have a flood surge barrier not far from where we're chatting right now. That's part of your life, but put that through the filter of Noah and the stories that are around that, and you don't realise that the story of Noah comes from earlier scripts that date far back into the Sumerian past of Mesopotamia, then, your outlook is going to be very skewed.
Absolutely. I think knowledge is a privilege, even now.
Yeah.
And especially in a time back then, 500 years ago, that privilege was not given to many. And so you would just believe it. And they say history is written by the victors. So, Henry VIII would have got to state everything, essentially, because he was the victor at the time.
Yeah.
Because, he took down the church.
Yeah.
The church was the most powerful entity telling you this thing. He literally changed the law of the church so he could divorce. So he is in such a position where he can tell you it's raining when it's sunny and it's sunny when it's raining, and he's not allowed to be wrong.
And then just think that somebody out in the street, out in the high street in Hull, or somewhere else in Hull, can start to take that apart slowly by using the printing press. The threat of that modern world. That's, to be fair, it's like keyboard warriors now. Something can be put out on a newspaper, and all you have to do is look at the comments section, and start to see how people can react to it. And so power, the internet, has been put into the hands of even greater group of people. I know I'm not necessarily saying that's taking us in the right direction every time, but
I think some of these people still believe in dragons. That's all I'm saying.
yeah. Well, Game of Thrones has certainly put a good visual effect out there, hasn't it? But the printing press is basically like the equivalent of putting internet capabilities in people's hands today. And
you've got to think, Cole, being that people are coming from far lands to tell you differently as well. Yeah. And that's one of the drivers why I think people see Hull as a rebellious city where, start of the English Civil War.
Yeah, is because you've got that influence coming in from continental Europe. So you've got Martin Luther and his rise of his protest movement in northern Germany, and then the rise of that Protestant church, that protest church, splitting from the Roman Catholic Church, driving through northern Germany and out into what is now the Netherlands and into Scandinavia. That info and those folk are all coming in here.
That's truly fascinating. That's mind blowing when you think about it. And do you think during the time, because obviously we know that the blockhouse has built, but we also know that some cannons were set to face Hull.
Yeah.
Do you think some of that was a bit like a friendly reminder of, hey, I'm still the boss?
Yeah, definitely. There's a bit like I'm looking at you. Well, I've got my eye on you. You could imagine that sort of two fingers, eyes back to you. I've got my eye on you. I know what you guys are up to. That's what the military are saying. The military are well renowned for doing that, aren't they? They're always just on the side of things, keeping a watchful eye.
Oh, yeah.
Making sure that people keep their selves in check, selves in line. And it also depends on society, how militarized society is as well. But yeah, this landscape, you walk it today, and you can walk up Tower Street, and you pass the big post office hub building, and you can wander up to the next bridge across the river, and it all seems quite sedate. In some cases, kind of sleepy, because most of the activity is on the other side until you get out into kind of the industrialized parts around here. But back then, you kind of got this big brothers watching you.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of like the CCTV of its day.
Right. So it's that hey, we're here to protect you from the enemy and yourself.
Yeah, and yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's... And you can almost see that, could they have done a reality, if they had TV back then, could it have been a reality TV program of the ilk of Big Brother, but with a big military installation, just, who's been imprisoned in here today?
Just imagine it. Day 48 of the blockhouse. Andrew has been tortured for 5 days in a row now. He still hasn't voted a contestant out. I'm down for it. I'd watch that. Big blockhouse. I'm in.
Oof.
I'm not going to go on it though.
No.
That sounds like a horrible thing.
Yeah.
It's cold. It's rainy. It's floody. I'm surrounded by soldiers. It's not my sort of day out.
No. And you start people saying, and they still haven't recounted their Catholic faith. It's a grim, tough. The past is a tough place. It really is.
Yeah.
Unless you're in at the top.
Right. So if that's a lesson to all time travelers out there. If you're going to go back in time, make sure you have some money. Here's the thing I'm fascinated about. How much would a language have changed? Would I be able to go back to the start of the blockhouse and still speak? I imagine it's the same English. But would they... How far would I be understood?
You would have been able to carry out an understandable conversation.
Right, okay.
It may take a little bit of time to pick through the words.
Right.
But...
so like talking to someone from Newcastle?
I would happen to guess that way, potentially. I would have basically said a bit like talking to somebody from Glasgow.
Yeah, there we go. I know what you're saying is English, but not all of it sounds it.
Yeah. There there would be certain words and that you could use to help describe. It wouldn't be a flowing conversation. And actually, if you had a bit of knowledge of Latin or German,
that would help.
That and maybe a smattering of bits of French, that would help with certain things. But you would be able to. There'll be the words that you'd be able to understand. There definitely. There'd be ways to get your way through how to.
So we're thinking like Spanish waiter level.
Yeah. You know how to. You would be able to work out how to buy that chicken,
right,
and not end up with a dead dog.
That's good. That's the relief.
Yeah.
A lot of times that I'm in Spain and I'm just like, I want some chicken for dinner, I end up with dead dog. It's so unfortunate.
Here was me, I thought you were about to say, here's about how amount of times I've just time travelled and I ended up in the past and I've ended up with dead dog when I've asked for chicken. And I said, look, I asked for chicken, you brought me dead dog again.
Yeah.
Get with it, Romans.
That's well, the Romans of the West for it. That's incredible. I think the whole thing. Why does history fascinate me so much? I don't know why. I'm just like it's some people are obsessed with the future. For me, right now, I'm such in a history renaissance. Do you think there is given the? I mean, I don't want to say Game of Thrones, given it's not real history, but it's reflective of our history. Some of the stories are picked from that. Do you think there is a renaissance of history right now?
Yeah, no, I think drivers like Game of Thrones, are brilliant because when you look at Game of Thrones and then you realise, or when you come to investigate behind it, how the complex histories within each of the different houses and how they overlap and who kills who and who sleeps with who and who does what to whom and stuff like that. And then you go back to, say, especially early medieval history, when you've got on continental Europe, you've got the rise of Charlemagne and the rise of the Holy Roman Empire, and the way that Charlemagne drives his empire expansions. And then what happens to it when brothers fall out with brothers and grandsons fall out with grandsons, and then the Holy Roman Empire gets split up between three of them. So what ends up becoming modern France goes one way, what ends up becoming modern Germany goes the other way. And the middle bit, the run of the letter, which becomes the Netherlands and Belgium, and then down through
the
Alsace.
North Hull of Europe.
Yeah, the North Hull of Europe. Down that way, you'll get split out into somebody else. And the things that go on across that period is just pure Game of Thrones. You know, who's killing who's sleeping with who's slitting whose necks, and some of it is brother upon brother, and you know.
It's like Henry VIII himself. It's very Mad Men. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very much. He wasn't meant to be king. His dad fought for the throne and then won the throne. His brother died. He became king. He goes through 6 wives and civil wars and has to build Blockhouse because he's fighting with Europe. Like, it's very exciting time. Whereas now, we seem a bit. I want to say as much as now we seem a little more secure in life. We could be going to war for Russia, so I'm not going to be. That's going to be famous, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we found this old podcast from pre-World War III. Oh yeah, what's it about? Just Jed saying, "Oh, we're going to be fine." Are you going in the wasteland tonight? No, not me.
Where are you getting your Nuka-Cola from? I found a bottle just around the corner. Yeah, I give me quiet times.
Right.
Any day of the week, any year. I don't want to be living in interesting times.
Right.
Putin can hopefully hold his bluff.
Yeah. I find as a comedian, much like you delve into the past and have to simulate that, I have to simulate modern life, and it's getting harder. I wake up and see the news and be like, "Good luck making this funny." But man, it's imagine. I wonder if there was comedians 500 years ago. There would definitely be.
Do you know, it's something that we, like archaeologists, talk about, and how you find that in the archaeological record is difficult. Okay,
yeah.
That sometimes you do get little scripts left, in ancient Rome or in other Roman places where somebody has written, "I know where you go every night," and another kind of lewd or fruity texts and things like that.
Henry VIII was known to be writing fruity messages to.
Yeah, he was. He was. To Anne Boleyn. Yeah. But in that day-to-day activity of how you make each other laugh, archaeology just doesn't really cover that, and unless somebody's left a dick pic inscribed into a wall, then it's. And don't worry, the past is littered.
Oh, that's what I was about to say. That is one of my favourite things about history, and it's something that's never changed from high school now to high school 10,000 years ago. We're leaving dick pics and just pictures of penises.
Yeah, and that is a thing, because for half of the population, it's right there in front of them.
Yeah.
And apart from that kind of inscribing, the jokes that people told each other, like, what would have people actually say to each other about Henry out of earshot, or their friends or their family, or like, what's so-and-so up the street done and things like that. Those are the intangible things that we can only get into through our imaginations. And we can only really start to fill in the gaps through our imaginations. But there are things that we always have to keep in mind. Physiologically, how we are today is exactly how those people were back, say, 500 or 1,000 years ago or longer. So the colours that we see are the same colours that we see today. The smells that we smell would be exactly the same as. So if somebody does a really loud trump, let's just use the word trump. Funny, yeah. Loud trump.
You mean for president?
Yeah. Or a which is really smelly, and people like reel but laugh at it. That base level humour of doing that kind of thing. People would certainly have done that and had that experience,
and it would have been just as funny.
Exactly, and that's what makes us human.
Dick pics and farts are universally funny, no matter where you go in history.
Yeah.
You go to the first caveman and let one rip, he's going to giggle.
Yeah.
And then he's going to be like, shh, pterodactyl.
You really are getting your timelines confused now.
Hey, who's the one who's time travelled here?
I forget, yeah, sorry.
I also, it blows my mind as well, because I can't help but think of the history in black and white, and I know it sounds stupid, but you don't think of bright, vibrant colours, and it's one of the things I found out about Rome. The statues, they were all quite brightly painted.
Yeah.
But when you see TV or history, they're just like white statues, and that's not how they would have been.
Yeah. And that's the other beautiful thing about doing archaeology. It's like it brings that colour. You look at the remains of the Blockhouse and you see all those red bricks and those red brick chambers, and you then start to see the colour of the pottery and the other things that come out of the ground. Weirdly, the past is colourful.
Yeah.
The past is not black and white. Things like when you go into our medieval churches and you see them today, and they're all beautiful, well presented yellow cream stone and things like that, and it's all very staid, very lovely. Not the right colour it would have been in the medieval past, where everything's heavily decorated and brightly painted and zinging reds and yellows and greens. And you still see that in some places in Britain. There's a lovely painted church in Pickering in North Yorkshire that still has some of those colourful representations preserved within it. So there's churches on continental Europe where you go in and you go, whoa, it's like a migraine on the inside, where everything is just so brightly coloured because it's been preserved. It hasn't gone through the rise of the Church of England and that Protestant stripping out of all that iconography.
You've not seen so much colour since you watched Changing Rooms in the 90s.
And they've brought it back.
Have they brought Changing Rooms back? Oh, well, I know what I'm doing tonight. So, I mean, you might not know this, but I like... So what buildings can we see now that would have been on the landscape around the same time as the Blockhouse then? So,
I mean, the obvious big one is Hull Trinity Church, or Hull Minster. That's been there for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
St Mary's on Lowgate, obviously the other medieval parish church. The old grammar school, the 16th century building which is the Hands-On History Centre.
Love that place.
Yeah.
Is it still got the Egyptian stuff?
Yeah, it's still got the Egyptian stuff in it.
Mummy
It's great. Yeah. The replicas of some taken from Howard Carton's Tutankhamun excavations. Yeah, they're still there. So that building, although I think slightly later than this one, would have stood at exactly the same time.
Right.
So that's another building. Just off on Scale Lane, there's the remains of a medieval building that would have been contemporary with this. Actually built before this in timber, but that's still there. I think that's beside the Manchester Arms pub.
Yes.
Yep. So that just sits next door to that. And then I think there might be Charterhouse, although it's mostly later building, Georgian building. There would have been.
This was 300 years.
Yeah, there would have been a building sitting there at the same time as this. The Delapol's mansion, long gone, where the Guildhall now sits, and that their mercantile sort of home base. There would have been, there's nothing there now, but that's contemporary. So there are smidgens of the traces of the past that are contemporary with this building. I especially like the fact that Beverley Gate is a kind of re-exposed thing, is one thing, is another thing. But I think the Hands-On History building, and you look at the red brick, and you look at it and you think how amazing it looks, would have, in that red brick build, in that style of Tudor brick, would have been something that just gives you a glimpse into the Tudor builds that you would have seen on this side of the river.
Strong buildings as well, still up and running and still...
Yeah.
So if this wasn't knocked down for industrial, this would still be standing?
This would still be standing, yeah, because it takes dynamite to take it apart.
Wow.
Yeah.
All that, and no Prospect Centre though? No.
So
they wouldn't be able to go to WH Smith's and get a magazine?
No, yeah, they would be missing out on that. Or they could get, or maybe even pick up the fanzine.
Pick up a fanzine, otherwise they'd be bored at work. So how many people would the blockhouse have housed? So the army obviously is manning it.
Yeah.
Are they from the local village doing a shift here, or are they from all doing a shift here, or are they being shipped in and then they do like a 6-month stint and then they're out?
As far as I understand it, they are people from elsewhere.
Right.
And but to run a blockhouse in a non kind of DEFCON 5 top level military standing, you would only need a handful of men, maybe 6. Something like that. I don't know. Do you know what? That's pure speculation. How many men? I wonder how accurate I can be. Oh, let's just say 6.
Let's say 6.
I'll take 6. Now,
more than a boy band, less than a football team.
Yeah. But just don't ask me to prove that.
Right, okay.
How exactly, Peter? How did you get to 6?
Well, I've seen how many pipes you found. So if there's 6 people, they're heavy smokers.
They're smoking every 24 hours a day and night. But yeah, we'll just say a small handful of people, because you wouldn't have to make sure that it's at top military condition all the time.
No.
You just have to make sure everything's clean, everything's functioning. If you've cleaned it today, you'll clean it tomorrow, you'll do it the next day. You'll have a daily routine. You make sure that the fire is lit, you make sure that you've got everything. So if you're called into operation, then it's there. But it won't take many men to run that.
Oh, that's great, man. That's day-to-day operation then, kind of a quiet life. Just looking out to the sea, cleaning things. Because it was never used it never was challenged, it was never...
No, it was never challenged. Obviously, there would be moments of, rumour that something's coming, and you might be on higher sort of guard level. During the English Civil War, there's certainly always a requirement for a higher sort of guard sentry, higher level of what's going to happen tomorrow.
Do you know what? Little interesting fact, do you know what it was? It's me time travelling to come draw a penis on it. That's what it was.
If we find that graffiti and one of those walls,
you will question me.
We know who's done it.
Yeah. I hope you don't find 3-year-old penis pictures, because I do not want to have to explain time travel to people. Well, that's wonderful, man. Thank you very much for talking to us on this episode 3 of Brickin. We have the live event on Saturday.
Yep, that's Saturday, the 24th of September. Just in case anybody's listening to this in the future.
I hope
the Holocaust hasn't come through Putin.
Absolutely.
And that we're all still here. So yeah, we've had an open day. It was really successful.
A super successful open day. You've missed it. You can see me about time travelling back. We'll get you here. And hopefully World War III is a great time for everyone. It doesn't kill that many people and actually just blows over. We'll go to the Winchester. I have been Jed Salisbury. Thank you, Pete, for joining me. And we'll be back with episode 4 where we will hopefully talk about the open day and explore people's feedback.
Yes, that's great. Okay, sounds good to me.
Excellent. See you then. Thank you. Please like us on Facebook, Instagram, social medias. If this is very far in the future,
fanzines.
Social media just was a thing we did in 2000s. I'll explain it when I time travel to the future. Bye-bye.